Story 1. I have never done it, for as long as I can remember. It is just not for me. I considered it briefly in my early 30s, but I never felt strongly drawn to it. I would rather rescue animals instead. Hopefully I will not regret it. Story 2. About 5, when I went to kindergarten, I had a pretty favorable opinion of adults, but most of the kids I interacted with annoyed me. Oddly, at that age I decided I wanted to grow up and be rid of my fellow children. Story 3. I never wanted children. I had my fallopian tubes tied when I was 22. It was quite an ordeal in 1982. Story 4. My mother said she knew right away because, as a child, when I was given toy babies and dolls, I would destroy them. She was right. I do not like children. I am 32 and my view has not changed. Story 5. When I was younger, everyone assumed I would have children, including myself, even though I did not particularly care. It was what people did and expected. When I was 30, my partner said that if we were going to have children, it should be sooner rather than later because he did not want to be too old. I realized I did not want to have children at all because I liked my life and did not want to change anything to accommodate hypothetical children. We had a lengthy discussion, which I repeated over several years, always giving him the option to end the relationship if he really wanted children. Now we are both in our 40s and happily child-free. Story 6. I never saw a reason to have children. As I have gotten older and seen the pain my friends have experienced when parenting does not go to plan, I am glad it is not me. Story 7. At about 5 years old, I always knew I did not want children. Story 8. I never wanted kids. I am gay, so it is not something I really have to worry about. When I was growing up, I thought not having kids was a fringe benefit of being gay. I thought we were here to help prevent overpopulation. I do not need kids. I am the kid. I do not like to eat vegetables or drink milk. I like popsicles, building with Lego blocks, and watching The Simpsons on TV. I should not be having kids. I should be having adults. Story 9. I was 5 years old, lying on the floor with my coloring book while my neighbor's children played loudly in front of the duplex where we lived. I looked up at my mother with a big frown and said, "Someone should tell those brats to be quiet. I'm trying to enjoy my coloring time." My uncle, who was visiting, said, "Wait until you have children and have to give up your coloring time to take care of them." I replied, "If I ever have children, I am leaving them at the church," because I had just seen a movie where a baby was abandoned on the church steps. They kept telling that story as I grew up and laughed about it. Now they are surprised I am turning 30 soon and never had children, except my mother, who believed me the whole time. Story 10. I told my dad I never wanted children. He said I would find a woman who wanted them. I made sure my wife did not. I had a vasectomy at 26. 10 years later, I have no regrets. Story 11. When I was 16, my uncle and 3 of his children moved in with us that summer. They cried all day and all night. Every day when I came home from work, the feeling when I closed my door, the silence was better than sex. Story 12. When I was 12, I took a Red Cross babysitting and cardiopulmonary resuscitation class to become certified by the Red Cross in babysitting. I quickly got many jobs. Almost immediately I realized I hated children and never wanted anything to do with them again. I have kept that streak for 34 years and plan to continue it. Story 13. When I was 12, I was told that because of my bleeding disorder I could never get pregnant or I would bleed to death. 10 years later, I was diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome, so conception was almost impossible. I am very grateful for that. When I was younger, growing up Catholic, I was expected to have children. When I told friends how screaming children in stores made me not want any, I received dirty looks. One even told me it was extremely selfish and cruel of me to reject motherhood, that as a woman it was my duty to care for children. When I said I just do not have a maternal instinct, she said I should pray that God instills one in me. I told her my decision not to have children was none of her concern. She blocked me the next day. Story 14. I never wanted them. I would make an absolutely terrible mother. Story 15. I have known I did not want children for most of my life, but it became clear during my teenage years when I was trying to figure out who I was. People told me I would change my mind as I grew older, but I am nearing 28 and had a vasectomy this year. It is such a relief. I am good with children, so if my in-laws ever have any, I will be a great aunt. Story 16. For as long as I can remember, I have never felt like I fit into society or would live a conventional life. I had a hysterectomy at 42. Story 17. After a deeply sad and abusive childhood, I promised never to do that to anyone else. I was about 12, maybe younger. Story 18. My preference solidified around age 23, but I have known from a young age. I never wanted to be a mother, never enjoyed being around babies or pregnancy talk, and went on birth control at 14 for my periods. I was so afraid of pregnancy that I wanted protection even though I did not lose my virginity until much later. Now at 26, my partner and I are discussing having a tubal ligation. Story 19. 10 days before my 7th birthday, my mother told me directly that I would never be loved, get married, or have children. That pretty much sealed her fate. My golden child sibling wants every weekend with her, so my sibling will have to deal with her later in life. Story 20. I had started pressing my partner to think about having children because of my age. I had always thought I wanted kids and wavered at times, but watching my best friend become a mother and seeing up close how demanding it is clarified things for me. Motherhood is largely caregiving, and it is relentless. I am glad I learned more about my values and saw the work required up close before having a child. It would not have been fair to a child, and I am grateful I do not have to manage that dilemma. Story 21. I never wanted one, never cared about playing with dolls, and already had to raise younger siblings. Story 22. Around 6 or whenever people began asking me. It's weird to ask that of a child, but okay. Story 23. I am thinking about 4-year-olds. I would despise them if I had never been one. Story 24. At 13 and 21, I realized different things. At 13, I suspected I did not want children for moral reasons. At 21, I knew it was deeply personal. I want children, but not here, not in my country, and certainly not on this planet. I am sure I will meet a great woman someday, but no child deserves a world like this. I might be rich someday and perhaps more lenient, but I would still be wary. I have a puppy and sometimes I yell at him. If it were a small child, my heart would shatter. I do not enjoy yelling at my dog. I am working on emotional regulation in weekly therapy and learning mindfulness. I have a short temper, and like my parents, I would inevitably yell at my kids, which is something I never want for them. Story 25. I am 30 and still changing my mind frequently. I am looking into freezing my eggs. Story 26. My son was 6 when he told me he did not like other children and did not want children of his own. He is 20 now and still says the same thing. Story 27. Ages 4, 13, 16, 17, 19, and from 21 through at least 34. Those are all ages at which I thought about having children, but they were never biological. Now that I am free of my ex-husband, I find myself unsure. I know I do not want to get pregnant and have always felt that way. I might be open to having children through surrogacy or adoption, but I am unsure. It depends on my partner. If they want children and I can trust them to help raise them, I am willing. If they do not want children, I am fine with that too. Story 28. I thought about possibly having children while growing up, but those thoughts were occasional. Around my mid-30s, those thoughts faded. I am almost 40 now and had a procedure on my reproductive organs 2 years ago. I am at a stage where I enjoy my freedom. My time, finances, and sanity are my own, aside from sharing them with my girlfriend, of course. Children are very draining. Even looking at them can feel like little dementors sucking the joy out of your life. I think many people regret having children but do not admit it. Story 29. I have known since I was a child. I never liked children in the first place. My Barbies did not even have families, laughing out loud. But it really solidified after the life I have lived and the life I watched my mother live. I watched my mother struggle to be the best parent she could be, trying to pick up the pieces of my brother and me after the man who fathered us broke us. After finding out what was happening whenever he had us on his weekends, she tried so hard to help us. She got us into therapy, did her damnedest to be there for us whenever and wherever we needed her, listened to us, supported us with everything she had, and made sure we never had to see him again. She made a big breakfast every morning, including fish sticks for me because I did not like breakfast foods. She started a tradition of baking cookies on the first and last day of school. She stayed up late helping us with last-minute school projects we had not told her about until that day, and she read bedtime stories with the absolute worst character voices ever, but she did try. Our friends flocked to her house because she made sure they were well-fed, safe, and comfortable. She gave her daughter the master bedroom because she needed more room for crafts, and she let her son take apart the laptop she had just bought him so he could learn how computers were built. This was before YouTube tutorials. She had dance parties in the rain, built blanket forts, played Halo, and watched Dragon Ball Z and Naruto because that is what we were into. She gave everything she had, all while fighting cancer twice, and it still was not enough. Her efforts were rewarded with my suicide attempt in 2017. I survived, barely, and then my brother died by suicide in 2020. I watched my mother break into a million pieces, and I cannot for the life of me see how any of it was worth it. She did not even want children. The man who fathered us tricked her into getting pregnant. She literally gave up her career dreams to raise us, and never once complained or made us feel unloved or unwanted. For what? Nothing could ever make me want children. Ever. I am having my tubes tied next month. I would have them ripped out and burned if I could. Having children takes a kind of strength and faith in people I simply could never have. Sometimes I wish I wanted them because I know my mother really wants to be a grandmother, though she would never say it because she does not want me to feel guilty about not wanting them. It is the one and only thing I cannot do for her. Aside from all that, I still do not particularly like children in general. Story 30. I can't remember. I think I never wanted children, but when I grew up, I understood a lot of things and became antinatalist. Story 31. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was 35 and alone. I made my decision then because I had always said I would not have children if I could not meet all their needs. I went through a grieving process, but I do not regret my decision. Story 32. Maybe 8 or 10. I never liked dolls either. Everyone I knew told me I would change my mind when I was older. I never did. I've been told I must surely regret my decision by now. I do not regret it. No, I still do not want kids. Story 33. I knew I did not want children when I was 18 or 19. I am now 37 and I have 2 perfect gremlins I love more than anything. Turns out I only did not want children then. There is nothing wrong with anyone who never wants children. Children require a lot of work and sacrifice. There is also nothing wrong with changing your mind as you get older. Story 34. I don't know, midway through college, probably. I didn't have any interest in having children before that, but I don't think I made the decision to be child-free until I was 22 or 23. Story 35. The pandemic really hit me hard, and I do not want to have a child I cannot provide for. Story 36. I was 11 when I knew for sure. I had never thought about it before then. All these commenters say they were able to get sterilized. Can I ask what you said to convince your doctor? As a woman, I was always denied because doctors said I might change my mind or because my future husband might want children. Story 37. I got a vasectomy at 18. I really wanted to get one at 16, but the doctor said that was illegal. I'm 27 now and still sure. Story 38. I was 15, I guess. I am 32 and still do not want to. My sister having her own kind of solidified it. Story 39. Having worked in healthcare for a few years, I performed all the tasks a mother would. I stayed in that role because I was paid for it. I enjoy having time to unwind after a long day at work without screaming children competing for my attention. Story 40. I knew from the first moment I truly thought about it. I didn't even like dolls. Story 41. I was probably 27 when I was told I was sterile due to an injury. Strangely enough, that is the age I told myself I would stop partying, try to settle down, and have children. Story 42. I never considered having them. Story 43. I am in my mid-20s. I helped raise my mother's children, my sister's children, and my younger brother's children. After that, I moved on. Story 44, 18. I have worked and know how bad the world is because of so-called teachers and adults in the community. Why would I want someone else to go through what I had to go through? The majority of adults are incompetent, undisciplined, and foolish, and many children are treated as unimportant. The child who already exists needs a lot of help because of these adults. Story 45. I always thought I did not want children, but by age 25 I was certain. My partner had a vasectomy when we were both 28. We both have health issues and agreed that if we ever changed our minds we would prefer to adopt, so the vasectomy was an obvious choice. Story 46. I do not remember ever thinking I seriously wanted to have children. I am a 31-year-old woman and have seen firsthand how hard raising a child can be. 1 minute everything can be going well. The next, your whole world can come crashing down. I have always been content to be responsible only for myself and not to add the stress of parenthood while trying to get by and stay happy. Story 47. I was around 10 years old. The first time I really thought about it, I knew. Story 48. I suspected this when I was 15 or 16, but I knew I did not want children after my sister had her son. For the first year after he was born, my sister and her husband looked exhausted and sleep-deprived. All their energy and attention went to their newborn. I do not have the energy or patience to raise a child. Story 49. Between 17 and 19, I looked around and decided that life was not for me. Story 50. I actually wanted children when I was younger. As I got older, I changed my mind. I was in my early 20s when I knew for sure I did not want children. I am 36 now and still do not want them, though sometimes holding and fussing over a cute baby briefly sends my ovaries into pangs of temptation. I always get over it. Even raising a puppy was too demanding. I tried and failed twice. If I cannot raise a puppy, I know I cannot handle raising a human being. Story 51. About 30. Around that time, as part of therapy, I did a lot of work defining my values, and they were not one of them. Story 52. I never had the urge. I was pretty sure by my mid-20s, and by my mid-30s I made it permanent. Story 53. I was barely out of diapers when I saw what my baby sister was like. That did it for me. No kids. Story 54. I knew from early childhood that I did not want children and could not picture myself having any. I have always believed that having children is a choice, not something everyone must do. Story 55. When I was 17, I was told I would not be able to have children, and I was happy about that. Then in 2001, while using the Mirena intrauterine device for endometriosis and also using condoms, I became pregnant. I think my daughter was meant to be. Story 56. When I was 20 to 21 years old, I questioned it, but I always realized I do not want to be responsible for another human being for 18 years or more. Story 57. I was about 7 years old when it began. It was reinforced in 2019 when I was 16, and again in 2023 when I was 19. The 2019 event resulted from my parents' traumatic divorce and domestic violence. In 2023, my mom had me act as a parent to my sister when she was working or spending time with her new partner and his children. Story 58. Around 18 to 20 years old, I realized I could barely keep myself alive, let alone another human being. Story 59. I was 6 when I told my mother that I did not like children because they were annoying. Story 60. At 5 or 6, I hated playing house and being around kids. Story 61. I always felt that I did not, but people often told me I would change my mind. Over the past 10 years, that feeling only strengthened. I had a hysterectomy at age 36. I am very happy with my decision. Story 62. I think I subconsciously hated the idea of having children because I was abused when I was about 12. My wife wanted children, but we could not get pregnant. We had 4 miscarriages, so we eventually gave up. Story 63. When I found out sex was meh and kids were pricey. Edit. Hi to anyone checking my post history. I swear this post actually isn't creepy in context. Story 64. When my sister was 14, she told me she did not want children, and she never did. She has an amazing life. Work, travel, a husband, an awesome house on the beach, and many friends. I have children and an amazing life in different ways, but it is not nearly as glamorous. Story 65. Around 14 or 15, I noticed that parents with young children were usually absent from events and parties. Sometimes we did not go either because we had something important to do the next day. I do not want to live with those restrictions. I had a girlfriend for a while who once remarked that I always wore a condom and suggested we could get tested and stop using one. I said jokingly that it was not sexually transmitted diseases that scared me most, but having children. The condom also had the added benefit of preventing sexually transmitted diseases. Story 66. I'm 50-50 on having children. I wouldn't mind if my partner does, and if she does not, I can be okay without children. A couple of years ago, I strongly wanted kids, but that changed last year. Story 67. I used to want children until I began my transition. When my reproductive system stopped working, I stopped pursuing parenthood. I did not preserve any reproductive material because I did not see the point. Story 68. I have never wanted children. Even when I was younger, the idea did not appeal to me. It is not for me. I would be terrible at it even if I wanted children. Story 69. I was a kid. Whenever anyone asked me if I wanted children when I grew up, I would shrug and say no, but if it happens, it's fine. It never happened. Also, who asks a kid if they want children? That seems messed up to me. Story 70. From about age 8 to 38, I was adamant that I did not want children. Then I spent a year thinking it over, changed my mind, and had one. Story 71. When I was 15 and discovered I was queer, I came to terms with not having children and was dead set on it. I also looked up to my aunt, who has not had any children. Now I am 22, and my partner and I are both on the fence about having children. Story 72. When I was 15, I learned how it works. I will never forget the pain of pregnancy, and I know I cannot handle having a child. Story 73. I was 7. I held my baby brother, and I felt it immediately. I started expressing it clearly at 11, and I had my tubes tied at 21 a year ago. Keep in mind that I am the oldest of 6 because of remarriage, and I have a 13-year difference with my youngest brother, so I definitely saw what it was to care for a baby. Even though I do not want children, I have always said I would help my brothers and sister with their children if they ever need help. Story 74. It does not matter. The doctors decided I did not get a choice, and now I have something that is not mine because it came with the other. Story 75. When I was 23, I dated a woman who was 24 and had a 4-year-old. Those 18 months were hellish. I swore off having children. I cannot even stand to be around them now. It is even worse when people bring their children to a bar. Story 76. I cannot pinpoint it exactly. I never wanted them as a child, teenager, or adult. Story 77. I always knew, in the same way some children imagine being mothers or fathers. It feels like asking when I became aware of my sexual orientation. As soon as I understood the concept, I knew I was not meant to be a father. I am planning a vasectomy. Story 78. I am 34 and many of my friends are either planning to have children soon or already have them. Because of that, I am certain I do not want children, but I have also begun to wonder whether that is only because I have not met someone I would want to have children with. I do not think age matters much. It is more about meeting the right person. For example, when I imagine having children with my ex, I am immediately certain I would not want that because I would have 2 people to care for, her and the child. You need someone you can rely on without any doubts. In my humble opinion. Story 79. I realized I would be a horrible mother because I can barely take care of myself, let alone a child. I am 19 now, and I still need to ask for clarification when reading instructions. That is one of several reasons. Story 80. I am 19, and during those 13 years I have never considered having children. Story 81. 12 or 13. I was so ashamed when I got stained underwear during my period that I hid them and hand-washed and bleached them when no one was around. My mother noticed I did not have 7 pairs of underwear in the weekly wash and scolded me. saying that wearing dirty underwear could lead to infections that could make me infertile and unable to have children. I thought that did not sound like a bad consequence. To be clear, I was not wearing dirty underwear. My mother simply assumed I was because there were not enough of my underwear in the wash. I never told her why. Story 82. I did not like the concept of childhood or being treated as lesser than adults. Story 83. I was 7. I vividly remember being in my room playing with my cousin, who was much older, and we were playing house. I was pretending to cook in the toy kitchen when I suddenly stopped, looked at her and said, "I do not want kids, and I do not think I want to get married." She was silent and confused. She kept saying things like, "You are so young. You will change your mind when you find the right guy," and so on. I am almost 31, and I still feel the same. I do want to get married one day, though. It can wait. I will only be a dog mom, that is for sure, laughing out loud. Story 84. Somewhere around 12, I believe, which means my brother was around 10 and my sister around 4. She was such a pest, and being the baby and her father being my mother's then current husband, she was spoiled rotten. She had violent tendencies and was treated like a princess. I still cannot stand her even now that she is 28, because she never learned how to have empathy for others. I looked at her one day and more or less thought, no, I am not ever going to risk dealing with that again. I have stuck by that decision without hesitation or doubt ever since. Story 85. For the last 18 or so years, I have not wanted children. Right now, I actually feel like working toward a high-paying job so I can have children. I have a younger brother whom I have been acting as a father to because his father is disabled and divorced, and it brings me so much enjoyment to do activities with him. If I had children, I would want a boy and a girl. Story 86. There was no particular moment. I never found having children appealing, so I never pursued it. Story 87. I never really felt the maternal urge like others did. I only seriously considered my options when I started dating my now husband at 19. We talked about it on one of our first dates and agreed that kids were not in the cards for us. 11 years later, we are still very happy and child-free. Story 88. I have had a deep-seated fear of things being inside me for as long as I can remember. I knew as a child that babies grow inside their mothers and that I wanted nothing to do with that process. But the fear intensified when my biology class covered pregnancy in 5th grade. Story 89. I have 2 children. If I had a time machine, I would go back. It is not that I do not love them, but the constant worry and struggle and the feeling that nothing is ever good enough. If I could live my life again, I would live alone. Story 90. I'm one of 6 children. The oldest 3 had no children. I don't think any of them wanted kids. The other 3 had 4 children between them. Not everyone necessarily wanted children, so make sure your partner feels the same. Story 91. I decided at 25 and had a vasectomy at 28. I never really wanted children, but I was told I would be a good dad, so I kept the option open. Then I met my now fiancé and we both decided children were not for us because of the current state of the world. Story 92. My cousin told me at age 12 that she did not want to have children. At age 22, she said she still felt the same and was certain she did not want children. She is now in her 40s and has no children. Story 93. I first expressed it at age 16 after listening to a radio program about the cost of raising children while my father and I were driving. I told him then that he needed to talk to my brother if he wanted grandchildren. I was in my 40s when he died, still thinking I might change my mind. Story 94. I never imagined having a family. It was not a goal. I wanted a career and to enjoy life independent and child-free. Story 95. I am 13 years older than my younger brothers. This has been the case since a couple of months after they were born. Story 96. I knew fairly early on, but the choice was taken out of my hands because I was not informed that contraceptives had been stopped. By the time I learned a month beforehand, it was too late. When I actually wanted to be a father, it turned out to be the best thing to ever happen, and I am really good with kids. Unfortunately, the woman I chose wanted to be praised for being a brave single mother, so I was deemed surplus to requirements. She ruined 2 children's and 2 adults' lives because she was a selfish, gaslighting narcissist. She even tried to convince my son's mother that I was going to kidnap my profoundly disabled son. And because his mother has a mild version of the syndrome, it was not difficult. Even if I had been that foolish, I would have needed a full medical team on standby. I only wanted to seek partial custody eventually, but I never got that far. I will fight for my kids all day long and will never give up. But now I'm labeled a deadbeat dad. I hope they both appreciate it in the end. This sucks because something similar happened between my own parents. Story 97. As a child, I wanted to be the dad in Cheaper by the Dozen. When I was 19, I was going to have a baby with someone who loved me but who cheated. Ever since then, I have known I do not want children. I was diagnosed with autism late in life, and my life has been hard. I know they would struggle. Story 98. I was very young. My parents told me not to have things I could not afford, and that helped me make my decision. Story 99. I never believed the opposite, so I didn't change my mind. I just started to vocalize it around age 16. Story 100. As soon as I developed a sense of self and realized I could have children one day, my peers at school began talking about how they would start families. Story 101. I've wanted children my entire life, but the reality of the world is that I don't want to bring someone into a world destined for utter failure. That would be bad parenting. This world is terrible. Story 102. I knew when I was still a child. Even then, I preferred adults to other children. I don't enjoy being around kids. I find them obnoxious. I can't stand their high-pitched voices and shrill squeals. Kids are messy and, all too often, mean. There are many other reasons, too. From a very young age, I knew parenthood did not sound appealing or interesting to me. Don't get me wrong. I still love my friends who have kids, and I don't dislike their children, but I find conversations about parenting and kids tedious and boring. There are a million other things I'd rather think about, talk about, and do with my time and energy. I have great empathy for how difficult parenting is, and I am exceedingly grateful I'm not the one doing it. I'm sure it's immensely rewarding if you enjoy children. Still, a few friends with kids have confided that they have regrets. One told me she loves her sons more than anything but isn't sure she would choose to have kids if she could go back and do it again. One said she loves her kids but hates being a parent. She didn't realize how much of herself she would lose, how little time and energy she'd have for the things she loved before the kids consumed her. Another said it completely ruined her marriage and intimacy with her husband, that the kids are always in the way, and that she has lost respect and attraction for him because he doesn't pull his weight as a father. I'm turning 40 this year and am increasingly happy with my decision not to have kids. I've never meaningfully wavered or felt lasting regret. Life keeps getting sweeter as we deepen friendships with other child-free couples, grow more successful in our careers, strengthen our marriage, and have the time, resources, and freedom to plan trips, improve our home, dine out as we please, sleep in on weekends, and do fun things with friends like throw epic theme parties, because we aren't devoting our spare time and money to raising children. I've changed my mind about many things over the course of my life, but it's remarkable to look back and realize how early and resolutely I knew I didn't want to be a mom. I'm glad I didn't let the world pressure me into it. Story 103. Honestly, I think it was in high school when the prospect of becoming sexually active first came up. That's when I started seriously considering what my life would be like if I got someone pregnant and what life would be like with a child. I'm sure there are many fulfilling aspects to parenthood. I have nieces, nephews, and godchildren whom I love dearly and see regularly. But the freedom I have, both in terms of time and finances, from not having a child is undeniable. Story 104. When I was in my 20s, I absolutely did not want to have children. In my 30s, I told my wife, I actually think I want children. Story 105. I am contemplating not having children, but it is a difficult decision for me. Story 106. Age 22. I got out of a long toxic relationship and did a lot of soul searching. I met my current partner a few years later, and hearing someone else with that mindset really solidified it for me. I love kids, and I think parenthood is a beautiful thing for people who want to experience it. My therapist said it well. I was talking about how I did not think I could sacrifice so much for a child, and she said, for some people it is sacrifice, and for some it is fulfillment. How you define it can really show how you may be feeling. Story 107. I was in my mid to late 20s, seeing my friends rush into marriage and parenthood, then try to live as if they were still single and become miserable, with children yelling and screaming, convinced me that this was not the life for me. Story 108. I've never wanted them, to be honest. I have known since I was a kid. It's funny how in my adult life people, especially men, try to convince me to change my mind. Story 109. I was 6 when I realized I didn't want children. I was certain by age 9 and haven't changed my mind since. I had my tubes removed at 29. I'm turning 36 in a few weeks and couldn't be happier with that choice. Story 110. I have never really wanted children. As a teenager, I said I did not want any, and people told me I was still young and would change my mind. I have become more certain of my choice as I have grown older, now with better and valid reasons, I guess. It is enough simply not to want them. Story 111. I've always known, I guess, because I've never wanted them. Story 112. Mother Nature doesn't want me to have children, and I respect that. Being raised by a narcissistic father will do that to you. Story 113. Kindergarten, 5 or 6 years old. A girl I played with said she wanted 2 children, a boy and a girl. It was not that I thought, I do not want children. Rather, I noticed I had no desire for them. As I grew older, I told people I did not want children and often heard that I would change my mind when I got older. I never did. Story 114. Age 27 or 28. Female. I grew up wanting children. It was my goal. I don't know what happened, but I had a strange epiphany and panicked, thinking thank goodness I hadn't had children yet. Now I am very clear that I do not want children. Story 115. Right after, a bunch of my friends told me about their struggles having children. They described loss of freedom, financial burden, and strained relationships with their partners. This happened when I was around 32 or 33 years old. Before that, I wanted children, but I was unsuccessful in the romantic department and almost got married. I used to be jealous of my friends who had families. Now, at 39 years old, I feel I dodged a bullet. Story 116. I have never wanted children and I hope I never do. I have felt this way my whole life, and I am only 22. I genuinely dislike being around most children, especially very young ones, and I cannot imagine being responsible for a child for more than 18 years. Everyone says I am going to change my mind, but I do not think I will. Story 117. I have long known that my parents were dysfunctional, and I sometimes find myself repeating the harmful behaviors I learned from them. I refuse to do that to a child because I know I would unconsciously teach them similar behaviors. Also, children feel like a burden I do not want to take on, both financially and in terms of time. Story 118. I was in my early 30s when I learned that, due to a significant injury I sustained at age 18, my ovulation had been interrupted for about 6 months and never resumed. My obstetrician-gynecologist at the time and 3 other physicians said that although I still had eggs in my ovaries, they were not releasing them, and I was completely okay with that. I got married in my late 30s and we tried to conceive, but it was not meant to be. Story 119. I never wanted them, and I have not changed my mind in my mid-30s despite ample protests from family members. Story 120. The earliest I remember is probably around age 8. My younger sister was obsessed with baby dolls and holding family members' babies, and I always thought, ew, why would you ever want one of those things? I laughed out loud. Story 121. I hated dolls. I found other kids loud and whiny. I guess I've always known, but I officially checked out in high school when we had biology class. No way in hell I'm going through all that just for another human. Story 122. Maybe 12. My sister and cousins went crazy whenever a baby was around. I never really cared and never learned how to hold one. I do not hate children. I like them, but in a way I never really grew up and I do not know how to relate to kids. I never know if I am being too silly or too grown up for their age. What I do know is that children are usually much smarter and can understand deep things far better than most adults think. Because of that, adults often overprotect them from reality, which causes problems later on. Story 123. When I was younger, I used to say when it is the right time or when I have the right partner. When I thought seriously about having children and motherhood, I quickly concluded that children are not for me. I love my friends' children and enjoy being an aunt, but I could not do it myself. Story 124. At about 30, I realized the only part of having children that appealed to me was naming them, and that part is over on day one. Story 125. I am 16 years old. I am career-oriented. If I have money, I would want to spend it on myself. Story 126. I was about 15, and the older I got, the more certain I became. Story 127. No matter how old I was when my kid was about 8 and developed an attitude, I'm kidding, mostly. I love my kid. I'm just occasionally jealous when my coworkers casually take weekend vacations to France or elsewhere. Story 128. I never wanted kids. I was always indifferent about it and never thought it would happen until it did. Now my daughter is the best thing in my life. I wouldn't do it again, but I sure as shit wouldn't take it back either. Story 129. My parents had surprise kids when I was a teenager. I loved my baby siblings, but the constant crying, tantrums, and screaming honestly made me want to disappear. Sure, they are cute, and there are sweet moments when we laugh or snuggle, or when they wake me up every day at 7 a.m., wanting to snuggle with me and give me kisses on my face. That is all nice. I get that kids are just going through their development, but I do not have the patience for that drama all the time. On top of that, my parents expected me to watch them for hours while they went out with friends or on dates. This meant I could not get to the things I needed to do, like school. I adore my 3 little siblings, but they were a handful. I still babysit sometimes, but the difference is I can leave at the end of the day. I can get in my car and drive away. If I were a parent, it would be babysitting around the clock. No paycheck, no clocking out, and no return policy if you realize it is not for you. Also, children are very expensive. If I had kids, I would want them to have the best of everything, but raising just one child in America has got to cost $300,000 or more when you factor in college and the fact that even after they turn 21, they may still rely on you financially. Does it ever end? I do not want kids at all. Story 130. I was about 13, but I never really liked babies. I am 52 and I do not regret it. Story 131. Since I was 12, I dreamed of having a daughter. Funny the things you think about at that age. Now I am 23, and I still want a daughter and also a son, but I have not yet found a wife. Story 132. At 19, after working as a nanny for a family with rowdy children, I saw how difficult it made the mother's life. She could barely get any personal projects done. Imagining myself as a mother while trying to achieve my goals did not seem possible. I would not enjoy the hassle and inconvenience. I also know it is cruel to have children when you do not have time for them or view them as an obstacle. So I abandoned the idea of having children. I still adore them, but I would not have any of my own. Story 133. I do not think there was a moment when I decided. I always knew I did not want children. I had a vasectomy at age 30. It was the best thing I ever did. Story 134. I turned 30 in a couple of months. As far back as I can remember, I did not want children. I remember babysitting once when I was about 13. I was miserable. From a rural town in the South, this point of view was unheard of. Many people still pray us pregnant and ask when we are going to make our parents grandparents. I had a full hysterectomy and my tubes removed a month after I turned 24. My husband and I have been together a little over 14 years, and we are looking forward to a lifetime of adventures together, just the two of us. Story 135. Since I was in elementary school, I always knew I had no desire for them. Story 136. I remember at 13, thinking that being a parent and getting married did not seem appealing. In my 20s, after relationships with several single mothers who said, I love my children, but if I could go back and do it again, I would not have them, my impression was confirmed. I realized that most people have children with the person they are with at the right age, not necessarily the right person, which always seemed like a serious mistake. Now, in my 40s, I cannot imagine bringing a child into the world. The risks do not seem worth the rewards, and I do not want to be 60 with a child in high school. Story 137. I am 36. My daughter is 2.5. We had her when I was 33. Around that time I still wasn't sure, but she was planned. My wife and I talked on and off for years about what we wanted. I never felt the pull to have a child. My wife thought I would be a good father based on my interactions with other children. I am highly analytical and tended to stay in analysis paralysis, so I ultimately decided I would never reason myself into wanting a child and that I might regret not having one. I shut my brain off and we did it. Ultimately, I could not be happier with the decision. I love my daughter so much. Even though life is different now, less flexible and less about me, she is the best child in the world, and not bringing her into it would have been a massive loss I would never have known about. Story 138. When I was 15, I couldn't make sense of bringing children into the world. Becoming an adult over the next 10 years didn't change that, nor did the 30 years that followed. Adoption, however, made sense. My wife and I adopted a niece and a nephew because they needed the stability their biological parents were not able to provide. Story 139. I never had. It became real when my mom became pregnant when I was 15. My little brother was born when I was 16, and I was the only one around to help. I had been the youngest up until then. My older siblings were in the Air Force and in college, so they did not have the same experience with little kids that I did. I eventually went to college in the next town over but lived at home. My mom made me babysit my younger brother, who was 4 at the time, all the time, and I ended up failing out. I moved out, took time off from school, got married, and then went back to college. Story 140. After my third was born, that's when I knew I didn't want more kids in my case. Story 141. I was 23 when I had my first one. I still ended up with 5, though. Story 142. I never thought, I want to have children someday, at any age. When I was about 18, I thought, I don't want to have children at all. Story 143. When I was young, I imagined that I would have children at some point, but I never wanted them. I thought it would happen by itself as if it were mandatory. I was around 19 when I first said it out loud, much to my girlfriend's disappointment. Story 144. At some point in middle school and high school, I was kind of depressed. Story 145. Half serious, half joking. I realized that my inexplicable romantic preference for women roughly a decade older than me, give or take a few years, wasn't going away in my 30s. Story 146. At 17, I woke up to reality and realized that while it can be good to have children, you don't know if you'll be a good parent. You carry that doubt for a lifetime. The world feels too cruel to raise children. Story 147. I never wanted them. I could barely take care of myself. Story 148. When my mother explained to me at about 5 years old that pregnancy is an active choice and not a natural, random event that happens to all women of a certain age. Story 149. I grew up in an abusive household and vowed never to bring a child into the world because I would not want to put a child through what I experienced. Living through that makes me afraid I will repeat the behavior. My wife wants children, but she understands my position. We discussed therapy to see if it would help. I am good with my nieces and nephews. Story 150. My son was born when I was 26, and I learned I was wrong all along. Story 151. When I learned that women bleed once a month because they did not become pregnant, and that to stop the bleeding I would have to either become pregnant or have a hysterectomy, I was shocked. Becoming pregnant was out of the question, and a hysterectomy was not offered because I was young and healthy. I was 7 when I learned about periods and hysterectomies. People warned me I might change my mind in the future or that a future husband might want children. Babies and children were never positive surprises in my life, so I never wanted one. They were always noisy and messy. Between the ages of 6 and 10, parents would yell at me when I refused to watch their children while they did whatever they wanted for as long as they wanted. It was unpaid. They called it good practice for the future. This expectation was never placed on my 2 sisters, one older and one younger, only on me. My mother's friends agreed that I alone would make my mother a disgraced grandmother at 37 because I would supposedly become baby crazy and promiscuous the moment I hit puberty. My sisters, who also went through puberty and have periods, were exempted. Later, I learned they believed this because my breasts were larger than my sisters combined, which they translated into me being demanding and promiscuous. Jokes on them. I never dated, never married, never had sex, and I never had children. At 43, I still do not want kids. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.